Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB bikini pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Before we get into the episode today, I just wanted to let you know, if you haven't listened to the mini-sode I recently put up, go back and listen to that right now. It is called On Demand Mindset Coaching for Competitors and Event Recap. I would love for you guys to hear that. And so if you haven't listened yet, definitely go back and listen. And I'll probably continue to remind you, but I definitely think that you'll get a kick out of it. You'll love it. And you'll probably be really excited about what I have created for this community. And I can't wait for you to see it. We've already got a lot of amazing women in there. And I don't want to say too much because I explained it all in the mini-sode, and we have a great episode ahead for today. But I do want to let you guys know, if you haven't listened yet, go back, listen to that mini-sode. And I hope to see you in the new platform I created. All right, enjoy. Today, we are chatting with a 21-year-old foodie who earned her pro card at USA's this past 2019 year show. She is a student at the University of Texas studying finance and MIS. She is a posing coach in her area and online. So welcome to the show, Hannah Fritz. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Awesome. I am happy you're here, and we've already had some good chats before recording. So before we get into everything else, I'd love to just know, of course, what is something you do or a ritual you have right before your heel hits the stage?
I've definitely been thinking about this one because I've listened to all of them. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have to think of what I do. And so as I was doing my shows, because I listened to your podcast, going into all of them this year, I was like, what do I do? And kind of what I realized that I did was kind of right before stage, I just kind of visualized my routine. So a lot of time, just during my prep, if I can't sleep, if I'm just my mind's all over the place, I just kind of put myself on the stage. So I kind of replicate that right before I go on stage. And then I just let my mind go blank and do my routine as if I'm it's in my mind. So I just kind of try not to think about it, and all the work's done. So for me, that's the most calming thing than to stress out and be nervous or worried or anything like that.
That's awesome. And you had done this past year 5 shows. 2 of them were regional shows, 3 of them were national shows. And you accomplished a lot of amazing physical transformations that, of course, won you your pro card. But what was happening on a mental level that you feel were some of the biggest or most influential shifts for you?
So for me, the biggest mental shift I had was from my first regional show to my second. So at my first one, I did not place how I had wanted to or what I needed. I actually got 7th, out of not a very big class. So I did not do very well. So, me and my boyfriend, who's my coach, we kind of went back to the drawing board and kind of saw, where I could improve. And at that point I was look, I was push me. I was I can handle it. I can do it. And it was kind of that mind shift where I was kind of coasting into that first one. And this one I was throw whatever you can at me. And all I want to do is I want to win. And it was just kind of that mindset where I was I'll do anything, to be my best. And so I'd gone into that first one, or the second regional show, kind of at peace with the changes that I'd made in those 3 weeks. So once I got to that show, it wasn't necessarily about my placing anymore. It was I was proud of the changes that I had made. And I think that was the biggest mental shift for me, because going into my first one, I was I want to win. I need that NQ. I need that first or second place. And then going into that, my second regional, and honestly, all of my other shows after that, maybe except USA's, but my other 2 after that, it was more just I know I look my best and I'm proud of that, and I'm going to go out there and show that. And then the placing is just going to fall. And I think that takes a huge stress and weight off your shoulders. And I think that it affects how you do on stage. And I think the judges can honestly see that too.
Oh, for sure. I remember I did a show last year where I did not look my best at all. It was the most muscular look, but not conditioned enough. I was
Yeah,
holding so much water in my legs from running way too much that week. But anyway, besides the point, I remember being backstage and being like, I can't show that I feel less than my best. Like I can't.
exactly.
And so I would be like, I am the best I can be today. I'm the best I can be
Hmm.
today. And then, but I know I carried myself differently on that stage than I did 5 weeks later on my next show.
Yeah.
And it really does impact the way you show up and also your placements and the way the judges see you. So you did mention though, when you stepped on or when you were getting ready to step on USA's stage, something was a little different. So what was different than the previous shows?
So for that one, I went through, oh my gosh, my boyfriend probably hated me for those 3 weeks in between Universe and USA's, but I just, I just was very, very hard on myself because I had, I had gotten fourth at, Chicago and Universe, which I was, not even expecting any of that. It was crazy for me to even do so well at junior nationals. Like that was beyond me. So I was like, okay, so went into Universe, did the same exact thing. So for me going into USA's, I had a huge weight on my shoulders because I was like, I can't let anybody down. I was like, people are now following my journey and, I've done so well. Like I was like, I felt the pressure from everybody else. So it took me probably about a week to almost 2 weeks for me just to kind of forget that and kind of go back to what I was thinking, where it was like, it doesn't matter what other people are seeing. It doesn't matter how I place. All that matters is that I'm going to be my best. And that's the only thing that I can focus on. So it, instead of like that, I had that mindset, for the however many weeks before that, I really let the stress of competing and like everybody else's opinions kind of weigh me down. And we had like a serious talk where he was like, look, he was like, I know you want that pro card. He's like, but if you don't get it this year, there's next year. It's not the end of the world. And I was like, you know what, you're right. Like I'm gonna go, I'm gonna have fun. Like we're going to Vegas. I did the show that was my first ever national show. I did it last year in 2018. So I was like, I already knew what to expect. And I was like, we had a great time. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to focus on that and, not stress about my placing or too much. And once I like shifted back to that, everything kind of fell into place and I felt a lot more at ease going into the show. And again, like I think that affects how I am on stage and how I present myself and just how I'm thinking about my body and what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely takes a toll on you, especially like thinking about what, you know, having that, I felt like I had that expectation, but in the end, like I really didn't. I put that expectation on myself. So
Yeah, that's a huge realization. And it's amazing how much we think or how much we allow what we perceive as external pressure to impact our mindset going into shows. It's kind of
yeah,
like when girls are like, oh, like I have to compete now because I said that I would. When
yes,
in reality, like there's no pressure. No one's gonna, like come chase you down if you don't do this show.
exactly. Oh my gosh, that's like one. I feel like people think that so much. It's like nobody's gonna care if you're like, oh, I'm not ready. I'm gonna compete in three weeks later. Like nobody's gonna be like, but you said you were going to do this one. Like it's all that you put the stress on yourself and you put like you said the external like stress on you. It's usually internal and not external like you think it is.
Exactly. One time I was working with a client and she was in prep for a show, and the original show she was going to do got canceled and postponed, and she was
Yeah.
super excited for that. So then she's okay, 14 weeks. I have 14 weeks, another 14 weeks to prep for the show now that where it had been postponed.
Yeah.
And we were talking and her mindset was just not in the right place, and she was very afraid that she would be out of integrity if she
Hmm.
pulled out of the show because she was no longer feeling it. If you've been prepping for 17 weeks and then your show gets postponed and you're
And
not feeling it, it's
yeah.
almost like get back to a place where you feel good. And so when we talked about this, we came to the conclusion that you can still be in integrity living the lifestyle that you want to live, and the integrity of in her profession as especially like as a life coach and as someone who helps a lot of people in that sense and inspires a lot of people. It's like you got to do what feels best for you at the end of the day. And if you
Yes.
do a prep out of resentment or fear or judgment, those types of things, it will never go the way that it would go if you were feeling excited and present with yourself and ready to rock that stage. And like you said, detached from the outcome of winning.
Yes. Yeah. I think that that's the biggest thing is like to detach yourself from it, because if you go in with expectations, your expectations will usually never be met. There is only one first place trophy, and however, how many girls go to those shows, like not everybody can get that trophy and everybody wants that trophy. So I think that one of the biggest things you can do for yourself is like not go in with expectations and just be happy and be proud of yourself. I know that's really hard to say because I'm such a competitive person. Like I want to win, like no matter what, but this sport is so subjective, and no matter what, no matter how competitive you are, like I used to play soccer, like I can go out there and if I want to win, I will go take that ball and I will score the goal. Like this is completely like being competitive is so different in this sport than like any others. And I think that some people like can't really separate that. They don't realize that if somebody shows up that looks better than you, like you're not, no matter what expectation you had for yourself, like it's not going to be met. And that's so hard to like grasp and be disappointed after like you've gone through a prep, like you've changed your body, and then like what, people are going to be upset at the end of it instead of being happy with all that they've accomplished.
Ooh, yeah, that's a big one right there.
Yeah.
It's like if you are so upset about a placing or so hung up on a placing, I think it's a great opportunity to see why so much of your worth or enjoyment is coming from an external validation of a trophy or a placing. I think that
Yes.
when we see it as that opportunity to grow mentally, like you did, in the sense that you were putting way more attachment onto, I'm going to look my best, I'm going to do what I need to do, and I'm going to do anything that I need to do to be my best.
Yes.
It wasn't, I'm going to do anything I need to do to win the overall, because I mean, you really don't know. And that's like
Exactly.
hairs of differences up there, right?
Yes. Oh yeah. I get, if you were to ask like any judge, like how, what it came down between like, the top five, like it's probably the slimmest of things. Like it's her makeup or her shoe. Like it's the tiniest little, not like saying that that's what it's going to be, but it's the tiniest little factors that you would never know. And it's not much that you can really change either.
Exactly. And so I want to talk a little bit, actually a lot about, I plan a lot of this episode around kind of like your journey through all of these shows, and especially because your body changed a lot, and your coach, also your boyfriend, outlined a lot of the changes he made to your programming on his Instagram page. So
yes.
Can you walk us through this? Like, why did he change your cardio from low intensity state to HIIT, and then from higher carb to lower fats, or hold on, higher carb, lower fats to higher fats, lower carb?
So again, after that first show, when I didn't place how I wanted to, and I was like, we kind of had that chip on our shoulder. We were upset, and we were, and we knew I could be better. So that was, we're like, we're going to do everything. So I don't know what his reasoning necessarily was behind the, like, let's, drop your carbs and increase your fats was. All I can say is that it worked, and my body responded insanely well. So I did, my first show was the beginning of May. And so May 4th. So whatever that Monday or Tuesday was when we changed we did my first adjustment, and we didn't make any changes until going into Universe in the middle of July or beginning of July. So I stayed on those macros the entire time. So my body responded very well. So it's still a learning process. And, being a coach, they learn your body. So for us, that was a big realization of my body. Whenever I'm trying to, lose the extra weight, my body responds really well to the higher fat and lower carb. And then changing from low intensity to HIIT. So he had me do this weird, it was like HIIT on the Stairmaster, but it wasn't, it was just, I was doing intervals, not necessarily like too much HIIT, but like I would do one interval fast and then slower. And I would do that for my entire time. And I don't know what made him, decide to change it to that. But it was mainly, the goal of it was to bring down my legs. Because like I said, I played soccer. I hold all of my fat in my legs. I am predominantly quad dominant. So it was our biggest thing mainly throughout the entire prep was getting my legs down to the level of leanness that they needed to be. And for me, the hit just started, everything started melting off. Like in those 3 weeks when we made those changes, I dropped like 6 to 8 pounds just from
Wow.
from those changes. Yeah, it was insane. And so I think, your body responds to the stimuli. So I think the drastic change from steady state, and then my calories, my body did like just a complete 180. And when my body started thriving off of that, it's like, if it's not broke, don't change it. So that was kind of where our mentality was. And I just kept progressing from there. So it was, it at the beginning, it was hard making that, like, that switch from the macro side of it, but the cardio, it wasn't too bad. Cardio is cardio. You just kind of got to suck it up and do it. But
Yep.
the food was definitely a big adjustment, making that big change, but it was definitely worth it.
Well, that's good. So have you continued to do that since your prep?
So yeah, we honestly, since my reverse diet, or we went back pretty much up to maintenance calories, instead of trying to straight reverse me this time, because my body does not do very well with that. We learned that last year. So when we added back calories in, we kept my fats where they were, and then just started to add more carbs in, instead of trying to bring my fats back down. We just added carbs back in. So my fats are really pretty high. And that didn't really change. And I still kind of do a little bit. I'm still on my cardio, and I do the intervals, not nearly as much as I did. But I do, because I actually enjoy them. They make the time go by faster than just straight steady state.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you on that one. I prefer doing HIIT for that reason, because I find like when I'm doing steady state, and I like steady state for the sense that usually it's like walking and I get to watch like a YouTube video or Netflix.
Exactly, yeah.
But sometimes I just like find myself so fixated on the time. If I'm not outside, if I'm like on the treadmill, I'm just like, get this over with.
Yes.
But at the same time, like you said, it's cardio, and if you're gonna do it, you might as well enjoy it and make the most of it. And
Yeah.
it's not gonna change anything. So
Yeah.
the other thing you mentioned too was that you did this really to bring your legs down, and it worked well for you. And
Yes.
there are so many bikini competitors specifically who are trying to bring their legs down. What other things do you think are beneficial, or what do you think other girls could do or consider when it comes to doing that, especially if they're in their improvement season?
Yeah. So, that's where I'm I'm still trying to figure that out, because my biggest like insecurity is definitely my legs, especially in my improvement season. So for me, I just try to stick with like what had worked. So we found that the intervals had worked on the Stairmasters and stuff for me. So I'll do that. I won't really necessarily do steady state stairs. If I do steady state, it'll be an incline walk. And then I still incorporate Plyos into my workouts. I used to do it a lot more during prep, obviously, but I still do it every so often, at the end of my workout or in between my sets. And we found that doing that will help kind of keep my legs where they need to be, like to where I'm not holding too much fat there. But it honestly, through every off season, my fat distribution has been completely different too. So it honestly, it's hard to, you can't like spot reduce, and same thing, you can't pick and choose where your fat is going to go, or your extra weight is going to go during your improvement season. So I think sometimes it's just accepting, how your body is and being okay with it, especially if you're in your improvement season.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be changes to our body,
Yeah.
like it's inevitable. And I think that if we can just accept the inevitable, and
Exactly.
if we know we're doing everything we can do and everything that's in our control,
Yeah.
then we can celebrate the changes rather than be upset about them.
Exactly.
Shifting that mindset from this sucks and I hate the way my body looks and why am I getting so big, or am I getting bigger, or whatever we fill our thoughts and head with. But then going instead to like, I'm doing everything that I can do, or I'm committed to doing better tomorrow, or I am learning new ways to grow, or I'm working with people who are helping me through this mindset, really staying on that focus path of I'm still doing my best. I'm still at my best right now and tomorrow. Again, just really detaching from the things that are draining you.
And that's like the thing, especially because your body responds to that types of stimuli too. So if you are upset constantly with how you're looking, your body's going to respond to that. You're not going to start to feel better, versus if you start to accept the changes and are happy with where you are, your body's going to respond to that too. And I think that detaching your negative feelings about yourself from that is probably one of the best things you can do for yourself, especially going through coming from a prep into your improvement season.
I totally agree with you. It's really important. And also the fact that like we are so much more than this sport.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good opportunity to find out like what else there is to us outside of the sport while still enjoying the lifestyle.
Yes.
And what you said about obviously like how the body's going to respond to your mindset as well.
Yeah.
That shows up in prep, that shows up in improvement seasons, it shows up regardless. So might as well have a positive mindset. And I remember reading in one of your posts, like I think, was it after Universe that you had found your body was holding on to a lot more water than it had in previous ones?
Yes.
Okay, so what happened and what did you do about this?
Oh my gosh. So this is probably the funniest thing ever. So I was having very, very bad cravings. And so this is going to be very gross, but I was eating like a bunch of tilapia just because I enjoyed the taste of it. And with where my macros and stuff was at, that was the thing, what filled me up. But I wanted something sweet. So I ended up like putting Walden Farms on my tilapia. And I had used it, I used it all during my prep, and I don't really ever cut it out. But I was, eating that. I was eating a protein waffle. I was eating oatmeal. So I was using a lot of it. So when I started putting it on my tilapia too, I started using way too much of it. And I didn't realize that until like one morning I woke up and I was like, I think I'm using too much Walden Farms. And my boyfriend goes, oh yeah, you are. And I was like, that's probably why my body's holding on to water. And so I cut it out, and literally in 3 days, my body was back to where it was.
Wow.
So it was just such a simple change like that. I remember like texting all my friends because they were asking about it, and I was like, it was Walden Farms. And they were like, that is the funniest thing ever.
I love that stuff though.
I know
love that.
it's so good. But it's like, whenever I didn't realize that it had that much effect on your body. I know everybody talks about it, but I was like, oh no, I use it all the time. My body doesn't or react to artificial sweeteners like that. But oh, it did. I did not realize it.
Our cognitive dissonance is like, not me. It doesn't happen to me.
Yes. No. I use it all the time. My body's used to it. Nope.
Exactly. Right.
So.
This week I cut out, because I use a mango Tarani sugar-free sweetener syrup.
Yeah.
It's so good. All their sugar-free stuff is so good. But it's sweetened with Splenda, and I usually use stevia, but I realized like I was having some digestive issues, and I was like, let's just like tone it down, because I put this in my waffles sometimes, and then I also put it in my tea, and I was drinking like so much tea.
Yes.
Okay, this is a problem. So like I'm like, this week I'm committed to not having it, and so far I've already noticed a change. But it doesn't mean I'm cutting it out forever. Like you said, you can still use it. Become more mindful of how it's impacting our body.
Yeah. After that, I was like, oh wow. And so I just like went back to like my normal use of it, instead of the extreme amount that I was using. Yeah. So that was big. That was funny. That was definitely it messed with my mind like crazy until we figured out what the problem was.
And it only took 3 days.
Yes, for me to go back to normal. It was a complete like mind shift too. I was, not feeling good, and then it was like, oh, well, there goes the water. I'm feeling better, and I look even better than I did before. So
yeah, you realize, oh no, my work's still paying off.
Exactly, yeah.
And you have an if it fits your macros approach to competing, right?
I do. So for me, I do if it fits your macros, yes. But whenever, like after my first show, we made the switch to including more whole foods rather than all the fun foods that I was trying to fit in. So I love my pancakes. I'm an athlete for her, or an ambassador for her. So I was eating those multiple times a day, and I had to start cutting those out, and just switch to, like fish and chicken and like just regular carb sources. So rice and potatoes and oats, instead of, I had some like English muffins that I was liking to use, and I was eating big salads and just different stuff like that. But it was still, if it fits your macros. But once I found what works for me, I ate the same foods every single day. So it was kind of a meal plan. I guess it's hard to say, but now that I'm in my like off season, I do, if it fits your macros, and like a flexible approach. But as I get closer into a show, I think it's beneficial to switch, not necessarily to a meal plan, but more to like whole foods and sticking to those type of, I guess, bro foods, you can call it. And sometimes I think it's, for me, like having that, like that sameness of food from day to day helped me like not have to think about it. So I kind of enjoyed being on I guess a meal plan those last couple weeks. But
Yeah. I think it's interesting how many women in, or who do if it fits your macros and compete, have found similar things to what you just mentioned.
yeah.
It seems almost like when you have that opportunity to follow that plan, it gives you that knowledge in the back of your mind, like if I wanted something else instead,
Mm-hmm.
I could have it, versus a meal plan, a strict meal plan, maybe where your
Yeah.
coach doesn't even allow any flexibility, that
Yeah.
could feel more restrictive. So it's really like mental.
It definitely is. Yeah. And it's, my boyfriend never gave me like certain meals and stuff to eat, but there were times where I was like, okay, like, will you help just give me meal ideas? Cause I was struggling, like trying to, put something together that I wanted. And then it was, once I found foods that I liked and I enjoyed that I put together, myself, I stuck with those. So I think that it's, when you're given a meal plan and you have to eat foods that, you don't want or you don't look forward to, that's where you start to get the restrictive mindset. But if you're eating the same foods every day and it's because you genuinely like them and enjoy them, then I don't think there's anything wrong with, being on that type of plan.
Yes, that's the key right there. If you don't
Yeah.
feel restricted and you don't keep telling yourself you're restricted, you likely won't have those issues that come as a result of restriction mindset, like scarcity or fixation or constant thoughts about food or wanting to go binge or
Yes.
whatever else it might be. As soon as you get that taste of freedom, right, post show, sometimes that can spiral out of control if you don't take on that mindset of I'm choosing to eat the foods that I'm eating.
Yeah.
And I like the foods that I'm eating, and I'll continue to find ways to work in the foods that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what's going to help us to remain in this for the long haul.
Yeah, for sure.
So your boyfriend also brought up your genetics, and we talked a little bit about how soccer played a role in the
Yes.
way your legs have been built. So what
Yes.
did you find was the hardest part about building your physique against, or I guess I could say like with consideration for your genetics?
So for me, I build muscle very, very easily. So when I first started working out, again, like I was very lower body dominant just from soccer. So when I first started working out, it was with him. He was, coaching me at the beginning, and we went to school together. So we worked out together, all the time. And he trained me like a dude. I was in there doing chest flies, like incline press. I was like doing lat pull downs with like a crazy amount of weight. So I think that that's what really helped me have like my muscle base that I have now, was just when I first got into lifting. Like I was lifting really heavy, and I was like lifting, like a guy. Like, so girls are scared to like lift too heavy because they're going to get bulky. And I did the exact opposite. I was in there like, lifting as heavy as I could. And I really put on like a good upper body at the very beginning. So for me, I haven't really had to like grow too much in my improvement season. It's really just been about, me really trying to like shape my glutes and get my hamstrings to pop more. Since I was more quad dominant. That's really been where I'm growing each year. But versus like, trying to balance out my upper body and stuff, I think I did a pretty good job of that when I first got into lifting. So I actually got my first feedback this show was to actually like, and I could grow a little bit up top, and I was very excited about that.
That's exciting.
Yeah,
It sounds like you took advantage of like the newbie gains, like right when you get into lifting and
I did. Yes. And I had no clue like about it until like, later when I was like, oh wow, but I definitely did.
yeah.
I'm very thankful for him for pushing me to actually like, lift with him and, train like I should. Cause I think that that's definitely what made me have like the muscle structure that I have now.
Absolutely. And you said, some of the judges' feedback you recently got. So what was feedback you were used to getting?
Come in leaner in your lower body. That was always my feedback, and we knew it. And a lot of times it's just to get feedback, just to show that you're interested. But every time I finished a show, that we always knew that that's what it was. And so my actually after Universe, some of my feedback was that I could work on my lats a bit to give me more of that hourglass shape. Which I was excited about because training back is my favorite thing to do. So I was like, okay, I will I will do that. So that was some of my feedback. But other than that, it's really always just been come in leaner in the lower body.
So I've mentioned now a few times like your boyfriend is your coach and switching
Yes.
those two things. So do you think there's an advantage to seeing your coach every single day versus those who don't?
Yes and no. So for us, we don't live together or live in the same city at the moment. He's back in Houston and I'm in Austin for school. So for the first half of my prep, I didn't actually see him every day. I sent my check-ins, like everybody normally does. But then whenever I got there and he was able to see me every day, I think it it is helpful because he gets to see if I'm struggling or like how hard I'm actually working and that kind of stuff. But I don't think that there's necessarily like an advantage or a disadvantage. Because if you have a good coach, they're going to be able to see, make adjustments off of just your check-ins. And from us, it was, we definitely distinguish between the coach and the boyfriend relationship. So when it was time to be a coach, we had my check-ins and stuff. And then other than that, we tried not to, you know, bring those two in together.
Every time I have girls on the show who, and I'm sure you've heard me ask the
Mm-hmm.
question before, it's like, I'm always so curious as to how they have found that balance because I can't, honestly, I personally can't even imagine.
Yeah.
So what are some things like, when did it ever come up in conversation when you needed him as a boyfriend? He ended up being more of a coach or vice versa?
Yes, it definitely did. There were plenty of times. So the thing about David is he is honest and he will tell you how it is, and that's one of the things I love about him. So, if I walk out wearing an outfit that I don't like, he'll tell me, or he doesn't like, he'll tell me, and like I appreciate that. So the same thing goes through whenever I'm in prep. He's not going to sugarcoat things. If I, you know, need to do more cardio, he's not going to go easy on me. He's going to tell me how it is. So I remember one time I was not, again, it's all mental. I was just having a really bad day and I was just not feeling myself. Like I didn't think I looked good, but two, my head was not in the right space. And I just like started crying. And at that point I just needed him to be like, just give me a hug and be a boyfriend. And he was like coach in that side, in that aspect. So that was like one of the main moments where it was like, okay, we needed to distinguish that. But other than that, he's really good about knowing when it's time to be coach and when it's time to be boyfriend. And honestly too, whenever I am in those types of moods and stuff, even as a boyfriend, he's like kind of, he's tender, but then sometimes he's like, come on, snap out of it. And I'm like, okay, you're right. So he does a really good job at balancing the client, coach, all that stuff.
What's it like dating a coach?
um I don't know. I mean, the thing about him and I is, uh, I had like another trainer when I first started, and then we started dating, and he immediately just took over coaching me. So it, I haven't really known anything different. It's kind of just been, us together, eating, tracking our food, and then like, me doing my check-ins and him adjusting and stuff like that. So it's kind of more just like a lifestyle for me. It's like, we do our stuff, and then I check in with him on Friday, and, we make our adjustments from there. I think one good benefit though of it is sometimes, whenever I was home, I definitely am like, hey, can you train me today? Like, are you busy? Can you train me for legs? So I think that was a big benefit of it was, him knowing where I needed to progress and me having the flexibility of him, just training me whenever I needed. So
Yeah, that's
it's
awesome.
convenient, but
That makes a lot of sense. So how long were you lifting and into fitness?
what was that?
How long were you into fitness and lifting before you got
Oh
into
yeah.
competing?
Say that again.
How long were you into fitness and lifting before you got into competing?
It was, I really started, I did my first competition probably, oh man, maybe about 6 to 8 months after I first really started getting into lifting. But I really was kind of on a weight loss journey whenever I first started. And so I'd lost a lot of weight, not a lot of weight, but a decent amount of weight for me. And I was starting to look good. And so they were like, oh, you should do a show. And so I just kind of did it for fun. And then after I did my first one, I was like, oh, wow, I really, really enjoy this. And so from then is when I actually made the shift of, okay, I'm going to do this, not just for fun, but for to actually do well in this sport. And that's when I started lifting with a purpose, training with a purpose, eating with a purpose, and all that stuff. After my actual first show.
That's awesome. And I know it can be hard to be a full-time student and also prep and work. So what have you been doing to manage your time and juggle all of this?
It is hard, but for me, I'm a routine person. So I have to keep myself busy. So for me, it's, I wake up, I go to class, I come home, go to the gym, and then I do my homework. So it's almost just, just a part of my day that I do. It's not necessarily oh, I have to go to the gym now. It's okay, I'll be back afterwards. My roommates know whenever I'm going to the gym. So it's kind of just a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really go out or do anything else like that. So it's not I'm trying to balance all of the complete social sides of school. But it's really just, making sure I have enough time to, do my homework in my class and get my workout in. And that's kind of what fills up majority of my time.
Totally. I love that. And I had the same experience. But I went to school online, so it was
Okay.
I got to choose when I went, to class.
Yeah.
Which made my life a lot easier. But I was also working a few different jobs and running my business. And I remember feeling the same exact way in terms of routine was the best thing ever. And it really was a lifestyle. So it wasn't that much of a switch to get into that kind of a groove. So, another thing that comes up a lot that I think many of us women especially tend to focus or fixate on is our weight. And your weight didn't change much as your body, or I should say as much as your body composition did. You did mention the 68 pounds from the switch, but were you used to that happening, or was it ever challenging for you when you didn't see the weight move?
Yes. So so going into that first show, which when I, didn't do my best, my weight did not change really at all. And I was a lot heavier than what I thought I should have been and where I was, but my body looked completely different. And so I was kind of trying to distance myself from the scale. And that was really one thing that David was trying to make me realize was it's just the number on the scale. It doesn't matter. It's what you look like. So that was a big thing. But then whenever we got over the fact that, okay, I could drop a little bit more weight. I know it doesn't mean much, but I probably could. Once we kind of got over that hurdle and I got to, where I started looking good, the number on the scale didn't really matter too much. So it's kind of you have that kind of turning point of where where your body should kind of be around in that weight. But there was definitely for a while where the scale was not budging at all. It was some days it would go up and then some days it would just, not change. So that's one of the hardest things I think is kind of trying to distance yourself from the scale, but in realizing that it doesn't matter, but sometimes it does. It's definitely tricky.
Yeah, it's a good metric and tool, but that's really all it needs to be.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it was, my base, where I'd have different stage weights all the time. So it was never really oh, like I need to get back down to stage weight. That was never really like what we were trying to do. It was just like, let's have a steady weight loss and then, kind of go off how you look kind of thing. And so that was really like where our focus was. And then whenever I dropped the pounds that I needed to in between my first and second show, the goal after that wasn't necessarily to lose weight. If I was losing weight, good. If I was maintaining, good. It was just kind of to just continue to like recomp my body into where I looked the best.
I love that. It's such a healthier focus anyways. And
Yes.
over the course of your season leading into earning your pro card, what did you learn that you think would be helpful or could apply to other competitors?
Man, that's a hard one.
Big question.
I would say, I know that is dang. So one thing that I learned was the biggest thing was just kind of separating the placing from what you're actually doing. Because I think that's, the hardest thing for a lot of people is they do this because they want to win instead of doing this to be your best. So that's one thing that I definitely learned over the course of the time was that it's subjective. So you just need to be proud of what you're bringing to the table and be confident in that. And that's really all you can do. And another big thing I learned was like to not worry about things you can't control, because that's going to just make you even more stressed because you're not going to be able to control them. Worry about what you can do and everything else will fall into place.
Yes. So what are some things you would find yourself worrying about that was out of your control?
I'm like a very anxious person. So I would worry about things like way too far in advance about like, when I needed to get gas, just silly stuff, or like what I'm going to do in 3 days, do I need to pick up my brother? Just like stuff that like I didn't need to like worry about in that time, just like kind of let it happen. It was like a lot of stuff that I would just like, not like worry about like what time I had to do something, and like that I couldn't really control. It's just like, you just got to do it. And so it was just kind of like letting myself not be so anxious and worry about things 3 weeks in advance and just kind of be in the moment and focus on what I have to do that day and then just kind of get it done.
Yeah, totally. And so you also do posing coaching.
Yes.
What was it like for you or did you coach yourself to transition your NPC routine to an IFBB routine? Are you currently working on that?
I have not started that actually. I'm not planning to do like a pro show until probably around this time next year because I graduate in May. I have to start a job and my boyfriend's wanting to compete early in the year. So we're kind of giving my body the rest that it needs because I dieted for 26 weeks. So I do not need to be stepping on stage anytime soon. So I'm kind of not I haven't really thought too much about that quite yet. I'm really focusing on getting my body where it needs to be and being in like a healthy state before I even decide what show I'm going to do and about posing. But I kind of have like an idea of like what I want to do. But I haven't really put too much thought into that yet.
Yeah, it's a big deal, I feel like, to create a routine like that.
Yeah. And I think that for me, like my routine that I've done this year, it just kind of fell together. It shouldn't be like that, but I kind of, I would look at myself every day. I'd pose in the morning and I just kind of found things that had worked for me. So my routine kind of evolved throughout my prep based on how it was looking. So I think that that's one of the things too about posing is it's like kind of have the basics down. And then once you really get down to where you can see your physique and where your strong and weak points are, that's where you need to start like actually developing your routine and seeing what poses are the strongest on you.
That's really great advice.
So what were you going to say?
I was going to say, so is that something that when girls come to you for posing help that you focus on first is like getting those basics down?
Yes. So whenever I do like posing with my girls that I have done, it's really just getting the back pose down and then finding a front pose that looks good on them. And I don't really like worry too much about arm placement or any of that. It's really just about feet placement and then making sure, your hips are in the right spot and that kind of stuff. And I do that like kind of a little bit earlier, whenever they decide to come, or we do that. And then, you know, I'll slowly add stuff in, and I'm like, look, it may change, but don't worry about that, because you'll already kind of know how to pose. Like, I want you to feel confident and flow. And if I tweak your foot more straight than it is to the right, like, you'll already feel so comfortable in that. You just have to focus on making sure that foot is straight, and everything else will kind of already be in place. So I like for them to have like the routine kind of already memorized and feel comfortable in it. And then if I make any tweaks, that way it's not like a big stressful, like having to learn it completely new before they're going to step on stage.
Yeah, that would be tough.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And there have been plenty of people that have been like, I'm 3 weeks out, help me. And I'm like, oh girl,
Here we
okay,
go.
I will do my hardest, but you gotta practice too. Like, I was like, I can give you a routine, but it's all about how often you're gonna practice. So
Yes. Oh my gosh. I used to like set alarms on my phone,
yeah,
because I would have, again, like the routine, right? I knew exactly when
yeah,
I was doing everything. And
yeah,
so when I found there were like certain gaps, I was like, set alarm to like go
pose.
off for posing
Yeah,
at that time. And it made a big difference for me because I just felt so much more confident. And now I literally, I think because of that season of just like, I'm going to keep doing this over and over and over again, even for 5 minutes at a time, and
yeah,
back and forth down my hallway,
yeah.
that was really impactful.
Oh, it definitely is. And one thing that I like to tell a lot of my girls whenever they're like, oh, I don't have time to, or I don't know when to do it. And I'm like, look, I'm like, you check in with your coach, right? They're like, yeah. I'm like, you know, in the morning, you usually look at yourself every day, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, wake up 5 minutes early and pose in the morning. Like when you're doing your check-ins or as you're getting ready, like in the mirror, record yourself. It's like, it takes 5 minutes. One, you're going to look your best because you really haven't eaten anything or drank anything. So you're going to feel your leanest. And two, I was like, it's so simple when you're like in the process of changing into your clothes that you're going to wear for the day. Just pose right there real quick. I'm like, and it's already knocked out and you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the day. I was like, and if you do that every single morning, like you were getting practice in every single day.
Yes, that's great advice. And like, if it matters to you, which obviously it should, if you're already spending like, let's say 2 hours in the gym every day, or
Yeah.
sitting down for 6 meals a day or whatever you end up doing, like
Yeah.
you can find time to pose as well. Cause then otherwise all that work is sabotaged because you can't present well.
Oh, exactly. That's like a lot of it too. I was like, you can have the best physique out there, but if you do not how to pose to your strongest points, like, you know, you may not win. And so that's one thing that people don't realize how important posing is until, especially first time competitors, they don't realize how important it is until they're out there and they're like, oh, I could have practiced a lot more. And it's like, I wasn't lying to you.
Yes, exactly. And then there's times where you have your posing down, but you're like, have I practiced enough? Like,
Yes.
am I gonna be okay when I go out there?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Especially like, that's what I like to tell people. I'm like, usually your first time, a couple times out there, like you'll go out there and you'll blank. You won't remember going out on stage. Like the lights are bright, like you won't remember. So it's like, you got to have that routine, like in the back of your head. Like you just got to be able to do that, you know, on command and stuff. So I mean, I catch myself just sometimes in between like rest times at the gym, just like doing my routine. I'm like, what am I doing? Like,
Same. I'll do that, and then I definitely see people looking at me and I'm like, I don't really care because it's good practice, first of
yeah,
all, have other people's eyes on you, and second of all, like a lot of people don't really know what you're doing and you don't owe
exactly.
anyone an explanation. So do
Yeah.
what you need to do to, again, be your best. And it definitely helps too because I feel like it keeps that pump going, and you can kind of
Yes.
like certain movements too that make your body look better as well because you've just maybe done, let's say, cable kickbacks, or you've
Yeah,
done like band fire hydrants or something, and then you
exactly.
know, oh, okay, like I know that when I'm backstage, if I'm doing some sort of abduction movement, I'm probably going to get a better pump than.
Yes, yes, that is so true. That's like how I figured out like a lot of my pump up stuff. Like I'm like, you know, I don't really ever I really don't train arms anymore, but I can't let it like my biceps or triceps like get any form of pump, or like they swallow my delts. So like I have to be, and I know that from working out. So I have to be like super careful when I'm pumping up.
Wow, that's really
Yeah.
good to know. That's like
Yeah.
great information on yourself.
Yes. So it's definitely like knowing your body and like finding your body and knowing what works for you, and like in every aspect, whether that's posing, training, food, all of the above.
Yes, and like don't just watch like a pro's YouTube video who says that they don't pump up backstage and be like, I'm not gonna pump up backstage.
Yeah.
Like find what works for you because you might you might be someone who needs to pump up, have some honey,
Exactly.
pump up again, have some more
Yeah.
honey. And then
Yeah.
you could
And I'm
also
like,
be, mm-hmm.
and I'm like, listen to your coach too. A lot of people like, want to get like a bunch of different like opinions and have from other people. And I'm like, just listen to what your coach says. Like, I'm like, if you're back there eating a Reese's and somebody looks at you like you're crazy, it doesn't, don't let it matter. Or if, you're back there not eating a Reese's and somebody is, like, don't let that affect you either. I'm like, everybody's different. And I'm like, your coach has something that's going to work for you. So I'm like, just trust the process and do what you got to do.
Yes, I remember being backstage and my coach was like looking at all of us and he's like, all right, this is so funny to me. He's like, okay, he's like looking at all of us. He's like, you can have some, to another girl, like you can have some like a sweet, what is it, Sour Patch.
Yeah.
And like he told another girl, you too, and he gets to me and he's like, have a rice cake with peanut butter. I was like, this is boring.
I know.
But then I was
But when
really grateful for it,
yeah, and it's different each time, like, and that was, for each of my shows, I usually had like my pump up snacks, but I was eating my meals. So even before USA's, like, they were running behind schedule, so I ate a meal and then they were like all of a sudden like running ahead of schedule, so I didn't even get to have my pump up meal because I just had like some tilapia and rice cakes and stuff. So I was like super sad. He was like, no pump up, and I have like the little Rice Krispie poppers, and I was like, what? No pump up. I was like so sad, but I didn't need it because I had just eaten a meal. But it's definitely like how you're looking in that moment too.
Yes, exactly. And like you said, sometimes, especially if you're doing a show in conjunction with a pro show, which now you'll never have to deal with again.
Yeah.
But if someone is an amateur and they're competing in a pro show, conjunction one or whatever,
Yeah.
the pros could say they're going on at let's say noon, and every bikini girl has probably, or let's say every bikini class has gone on A and B, and you're in class E. You may not go on just because the other classes went in amateur.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So now that you have become an IFBB pro, what has changed, or what's kind of been going through your mind, and what is your plan moving forward? I know we talked about when you're thinking of stepping on stage, but what's your overall plan at this point in time?
So my overall plan is obviously like eventually want to get to the Olympia. I think that's every pro's goal. So for me, like it's more just going to be like strategic. So I'm not going to step on stage until like the 2020 points start accumulating, just because it would be silly for me to step on stage sooner than that and do shows that aren't going to matter. And two, like, I need the break mentally, physically, like, and just personally, like everything. So it's definitely not going to be until next year. I've got some other things I want to, I need to focus on. Like I said, I'm graduating, I have to get a job. My boyfriend's wanting to compete and do his national shows at the beginning of the year. So I'm going to go be supportive girlfriend for all that. And really just kind of not focus too much. I'm like, the stage will always be there. And especially now that I am a pro, like, it's not like I'm chasing for that pro card. There's so many shows that I can do. So it's really just going to kind of be when my body's ready and when I'm in that routine of when I have my job and I can kind of settle in and I know that I'm ready for prep to start. So we don't really have a set date or goal or time or anything, but there's like the San Antonio show in Texas like later in the year next year that I kind of have my eyes on because it's not too far from where I am, but that could change whenever things get closer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand that. I have like a post-it on, well, not, it's a note card on my wall, and it's like all these shows that I'm thinking about doing.
Yeah,
I just keep reminding myself, like, I don't get to choose. It's up to my body.
exactly.
And I can only do what I can do. And I think it's interesting that you said that now that like pressure or that weight is lifted of chasing the pro card, now you have a lot more freedom to really do what you need to do and focus on those things as well. So did you notice like anything? I guess my question next, I guess, is when you became an IFBB pro, were you surprised by anything, like how you accumulate your actual card or some of the logistical things of it, or have you not really been exposed to that yet?
Not quite. So I actually don't even know how I'm supposed to get my card. I thought they were like supposed to mail me something, but I haven't really gotten anything. So I probably should look into that. But again, it won't really matter because I don't plan on competing this year.
Yeah.
But I remember they changed the points right after I had gotten my pro card. So I remember like training in the gym and like obviously like I've been tuned into like all of the pro stuff and seeing like how everybody qualifies. And like, I'm like always so interested. And I remember this vividly. They released the points. And I remember seeing it on people's like Instagram stories. And like, I was training in the gym and I like ran over to my boyfriend and I was like, oh my gosh, look at this. I was like, now that it applies to me, like we can actually like this makes sense. Like we need to like start looking into this. So I think that was like probably like the biggest like realization I had that like, oh wow, I'm actually a pro is like whenever they change the point system, I'm like, oh my gosh, this actually applies to me.
Yeah, that's such a
Yeah.
great point. Like, your focus has to shift to what now applies to you in the
Yeah.
IFBB league rather than the NPC going into the IFBB.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was, everybody like, is always people that aren't pros are like, oh, the points change. Like, that's so good. And I'm like, I was always like that. I'm like, when they changed the points, I was like, I don't know how that's going to work. And then now that they're changing, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And then I was like, wait, I was like, that applies to me. I was like, I have to like look at this and like, this is what I'm going to be doing. So it was kind of cool, like having that mind shift change.
Yeah, like no longer about like being a fan of the sport or the profession.
Exactly.
And now it's like,
Exactly.
oh, this is actually impacting my life directly now. So,
Yes.
how do you feel about the new point system?
I'm excited. I like the new point system. I think that this is going to be a lot better than what it was. I'm interested to see how like the like elimination round and stuff like that goes to where,
Me too.
I'm interested to see that next year. So I think that that's going to be cool. I think it's going to be something different that they've done, but I really enjoy how they're giving more athletes the opportunity to go, but then they're keeping the prestige by only picking like the top few to actually like go on and do like get the trophy or do like place and stuff like that. So they're keeping the like prestige in it, but also giving more athletes the opportunity to come and step on stage.
And I love that you mentioned that because I think that's the biggest concern within the sport is making sure that there's still a level of prestige to every show that
Exactly.
is like big. We don't want it to be like anyone, it's a free for all because no one
Yeah.
here. We watch it because it's the elite. These are the girls
Yes.
who have earned their top spot, So I think
Yes.
by having an elimination round too, it's kind of like I want to use an appropriate word, but I'm not going to. It's almost like a purge. Like, okay, like you didn't make it, and
Yeah.
that sucks. And I imagine a few things. So I actually just talked to Hannah Devore about this too on an episode, like the new. I'm pretty sure I was talking with her about it, but yes, it was. So anyway, I didn't get to say this, I don't think, but something that I thought about too was like the level of commitment girls will need to bring now to every show is about looking their best, not about earning points as much, because
Yes.
the likelihood of actually making it even into that elimination round may not be as high if you're not coming to place your best and actually win the show.
Exactly. And I think that is so important now. And I think that that's what kind of maybe what they realized last year was that everybody was just continually doing shows and not everybody was looking their best or what they wanted the sport to look like because people were just trying to rack up those points. And I think that in terms of longevity, it's hard on especially the people that are really wanting to compete, especially bikini girls. Like there's so many bikini girls at the shows. So I think in terms of making each show have the best quality, I think that this is going to be a good way to go because it's kind of, now that, if you win your show, you don't need to compete again because you're already there,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's going to start making the longevity of each individual like person longer too, and helping, people really just dive into focusing on one show and not like, well, I'm going to do this show and this show and this show and this show versus like, this is my one show and I'm going to bring the best I can to that and see how I do. And if, I need to do a couple shows after that, then we'll assess that after. But just really having that one show and goal in mind.
Yes, exactly. And it's kind of like when you watch, like, okay, I'm going to use Angelica as an example. So this episode is going to come out, of course, after we know who wins the 2019 Olympia. But I
Yeah.
will say, when she won the 2018 Olympia, she did not step on stage at all between those shows. I do not believe, unless she did Asia Grand Prix, which I don't remember. I don't believe she did. But
I don't think I think she may have actually.
okay, so yeah, I couldn't remember, but she barely. I mean, she didn't really touch the stage. She didn't touch the circuit.
Yeah.
And now she's bringing a much for 2018 from what, or 19, from what we can tell in her check-ins and stuff, is her package looks way more developed, and not as much, it looks more developed, and she was had the time to build, is what I'm getting at. So because
Yes.
her focus was only on bringing her next best again to the Olympia, I think that opportunity is now being given to the other girls who have qualified for the Olympia. And
I agree.
they can be like, not only do I not have to put my body through all this, but I can be strategic in what I actually bring. And like you said, I think it's going to help that the sport, it's going to bring a different level of competition to that stage.
Yes, I 100% agree with that.
I'm interested in seeing how it pans out, especially like this year. Obviously, this will come out after we've already watched it, but I'm very excited about it. It's this weekend.
I know, I'm so excited. I wanted to go so bad, but we waited like last minute to like decide to book things, and everything just got way too expensive. And so we're like,
Yeah.
we'll just watch from the TV again.
And it's like booked out, and you can't
Yes.
you can't stay anywhere. So yeah, I decided not to go either. I was like upset about it, but then I was kind of like, well, I'm gonna watch from the comfort of my home, and there'll be another
Yes.
opportunity. And then I was like, am I missing out on these opportunities to meet more? And I'm like, honestly, no. If
Yeah.
right, it would have happened. I would have.
Yeah.
It's all gonna be perfect timing, anyways. And
Exactly.
yeah, so it's just really cool. I'm excited to see how it pans out, and I'll have to message you so we could like be like, oh my god, did you see this?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, well, okay, so before we wrap up the episode, I'd love to know, you already have given a lot of great advice and insight, and specifically you told us some of the lessons you learned, but what is your best advice for girls who are thinking about competing and haven't competed yet? And then also your best advice for girls who are on their road to pro?
So my best advice for people that are wanting to get into competing is, I would say, one, find a good coach and look into it, and somebody that's reputable, because there have been so many people that just, jump into it and don't have a good coach and don't have a good, prep. So I would definitely say do your research and do it whenever you feel is right. Like, don't do it because you see other people doing it. Like, do it for yourself and not necessarily for that trophy or for that win. And then the second one was for people that are wanting to win their pro card, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the same thing, is don't focus so much on the pro card, because it'll come. I was like, just focus on being your best and bringing your best to the stage, and that's really all you can do. Because when you separate that, that's whenever you truly become your best. Because when you're so fixated on that pro card or that win, you may not be your best. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest takeaways and insights I can give to somebody, and especially a lot of people that have like reached out to me or asked me that have been like competing lately and are really wanting their pro card. I'm like, this is what worked for me, is I just separated the win from the competition, and really just focused on myself. And I think that that's really what kind of set me apart this season.
I love that. That is awesome. Yep. You're living, breathing proof of that advice being really great and working. So I'd love for everyone to be able to connect with you and reach out to you. So where can people find you?
So I need to get back into posting more on Instagram, but on Instagram, it's just at Hannah Fritz, and it's 2 Z's at the end. So it's FRITZZ, because somebody else took my real name. But I think that's really it. I'm not really active on much other social medias or anything like that.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'll make sure to put that link in the show notes page. And to everybody listening, thank you guys so much again for coming on for another great episode. And I'm excited about this month, and I hope you guys are too. And Hannah, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I had an awesome time.
Me too, of course. So hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode.